I want to start this video by talking about how I started with the series. I began with Resident Evil 6, and yes, that was a bad move. Obviously, when you start on the 6th entry of any series, there's going to be some difficulty. Needless to say, it didn't grab me. The game wasn't really scary, and the gameplay wasn't very fun or engaging, so I left it there. Instead, being an onlooker of the series, respecting the directions the series went but never really having an opinion on them. That all changed with the release of the remake of Resident Evil 2. The discourse surrounding the game got me intrigued. It seemed scary, the gameplay seemed intriguing, and in general the game seemed very interesting. I played it, loved it, and realized fairly quickly that I fell in love with the series. I then played Resident Evil Revelations, as it was on sale on the Nintendo Switch, finding that there were similarities to the Resi 2 remake, yet it didn't scratch that same itch. It's a great game, but I needed to go back further, so I sought out the Resident Evil 1 remake and found it on Steam. Needless to say that I found the one. So this video spawned from a regret that I had never given this series the chance it deserved, and now I want to sort of celebrate it. In this video, I will be giving the Resident Evil remake an analysis 17 years after it first came out. In a way, this will be a retrospective, but more importantly, I hope that this video will reach people like me, the people who didn't really care about this series or pay much attention to it. And to the longtime fans of the series, I do hope you enjoy my analysis of the game and that you may even find a new way to look at it. Now, be warned, this video will have full spoilers for the game, so if you don't want that, click off right now, but if you do want that, then stick around, and I hope you enjoy the video. Resident Evil was released for the Sony PlayStation in Japan on March 22nd, 1996, and while it wasn't the first survival horror game, it was definitely one of the first to truly popularize the genre. It frightened people in ways that they had never really experienced before, and while it did come out after the likes of Alone in the Dark, I think it did its style so much better. The game itself sold over 2.75 million units, and it's been re-released in various ways since. Now, it wasn't perfect, and I do plan to play the original game at some point, but obviously, we aren't covering that today. No, instead today, we will be covering the remake of the original Resident Evil, or more specifically, the remaster of the remake of the original. Originally released for the Nintendo GameCube in 2002, the remake had vastly improved visuals, but it kept the overall experience the same. It keeps a lot of what the original game did in terms of basic layout and the basic structure of puzzles, but the remake decides to make a few changes to the overall structure and flow of the game. I think that is what makes the remake beloved by so many. The game wasn't completely reimagined, it was remade to be closer to the original vision. Not unlike the recent Resident Evil 2 remake that released in January earlier this year. Today, the goal is to dissect the Resident Evil remake and to try to discern why I think the game still manages to hold up so well. This video will be an in-depth look at the game from all angles, from its story to its gameplay and the nuances in between. First up, let's tackle the story. The game is set in 1998 and takes place in the outskirts of Raccoon City, specifically the Spencer Mansion and the forest surrounding it. You play as either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, a decision you make when starting a new game. They are both a part of the Raccoon City Police Department's STARS division, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Chris and Jill are an Alpha team, alongside Albert Wesker and Barry Burton. Together, they are searching for Bravo team, who had gone missing around the area. Upon arriving at the location, Alpha Team finds a crashed helicopter with a deceased member of Bravo Team within. Moments later, they are attacked by a band of carnivorous dogs that are infected by the T-virus. They rush for the nearest shelter, which just so happens to be the Spencer Mansion. I do want to give massive props to the original game's opening, as there is actually some decent cinematography in it. It also manages to create an uneasy atmosphere that works pretty well to ease you into the game. Or unease, I guess. It's also shot in black and white, which is kind of a horror movie trope, but it works well on various fronts. The lack of colour, as well as the blurry nature of PlayStation 1 FMVs, makes it really hard to make out small details, leaving the player wondering what the hell is really going on. The cuts to the extreme close-ups of the dogs' mouths are very jarring, and even manages to obscure whether or not they are dogs. And finally, the rather low frame rate of the scene makes it feel a lot jumpier and jittery, giving it a handheld camera sort of feeling that makes it seem less like a Hollywood production and more like an actual documented series of events. And then it goes into such an extremely corny cast scene showing all the characters and like their blood type for some reason, like ending on the Resident Evil title in front of a bunch of fire. What the fuck? At this point, who you choose to play as begins to have an effect. If you chose to play as Chris, you are joined by Wesker and Jill in the main hall. If you decided to play as Jill, you would be joined by Wesker and Barry in the main hall. It's weird to me that Chris just disappears at the start of Jill's playthrough, but I suppose it was due to them wanting to keep the number of people entering to just 3. Why that was the case, I have no idea. Regardless of who you choose, the general story remains the same, and for the sake of time, I will be covering Jill's playthrough from here on, as it's more interesting to talk about. Chris's playthrough just doesn't have as much going on, and Jill has Barry. Barry is life. So, as I said, when Jill enters the mansion, it is with Wesker and Barry. As previously mentioned, Chris has gone missing. The trio hears a gunshot, which Jill and Barry go to investigate, leaving Wesker behind in the main hall. Upon reaching the source of the gunshot, Jill finds her first zombie, which is hunched over and eating the remains of a member of Bravo team. Shocked, she runs away and reunites with Barry, who takes it down.
Barry!
What is it?
Look out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of it! What the hell is this thing?
I found Kenneth killed by this thing.
At this point, the two decide to split up and investigate the mansion. Jill finds that the mansion is infested with zombies, and she does her best to navigate the rooms, finding various keys to locked rooms and clues as to what happened at the mansion. One of my favourite notes in the game is written by someone who is infected with the T-virus but doesn't know it yet, and it's kind of this story where they are just going through the motions and it ends up with just babbling, and it's actually pretty dark, and yeah. Eventually, she finds a way out of the mansion, but not away from the horror by any means. She ends up in the courtyards outside of the mansion, courtyards which are home to a terrifying new creature, Lisa Trevor, a previous test subject that roams around the grounds, and Jill has to navigate around her to survive. Jill then finds an old residence that harbours gigantic spiders and an underground testing facility on aquatic life. Here, she finds Barry seemingly talking to someone in a very suspicious way.
But it's not necessary to destroy stars. What about my family? If I play my cards right. Jill!
Barry, I heard someone talking.
Oh, you heard. I think age is starting to take its toll. Talking to myself is becoming a bad habit.
Talking to yourself? You alright? What's gotten into you?
I'm getting you worried, aren't I? But don't, I'm alright. I guess this creepy mansion has gotten to my nerves. Anyway, I think I'll go outside, get some fresh air for a change. Don't worry, I'm just going to get some fresh air. If I'm lucky, I'll get to waste some monsters along the way.
Further into the residence, Jill finds a subject called Plant 42, which was infected with the T-virus and has mutated into a massive sentient creature.
What the hell is this thing?
Barry!
Jill!
After some assistance from Barry, the two decide to split up again, with Barry staying behind and Jill returning to explore the mansion. Along the way, she reunites with Wesker, who tells Jill that Barry seems to be acting a bit strange.
Jill, so you're safe.
That's what I was going to say.
I apologize. It was all I could do to protect myself against those strange creatures.
I understand. Anyway, it's good that you're safe.
Did you notice? Barry, he sounded a little flaky.
Now that you mention it, yeah. I'll keep a close eye.
Maybe it's quite natural under these circumstances. It's not really our standard operation. Jill, our first priority is to get out of here.
I agree.
There are still rooms in that mansion we can't get into because they're locked up. I've been looking for ways to...
Okay, if there's anything, I'll go back to the other mansion.
I'm counting on you.
Later on, Jill finds an underground cave and begins to explore it. Here, she finds Enrico, the captain of Bravo Team, who informs Jill that someone in STARS has betrayed them. Enrico gets shot before he can tell Jill who the traitor is. Jill then finds an elevator in the cave that leads further down into it, with Barry joining her. After Jill gets off, Barry then ends up taking the elevator back up, leaving Jill behind and trapped in the cave, along with Lisa Trevor, who has made a home for herself in the cave. After eventually escaping, Jill returns to the mansion, where she unlocks a door leading to an ominous-looking basement, where she once again runs into Barry. Shocked and surprised that she survived, Barry then pulls a gun on Jill, who disarms him almost immediately. At this point, Lisa Trevor appears and forces Jill to make a choice. She can either give the gun back to Barry or withhold it from him. The latter option ends up killing Barry, so since I'm not a complete monster, I give it back to him. He then helps you fight Lisa, distracting her while you push these 4 blocks off the platform, lifting the lid off the coffin where Lisa's mother lies. After exclaiming "Mother," she proceeds to commit suicide by jumping off of the platform. Jill moves on, seemingly forgiving Barry for pulling a gun on her, since neither of them talk about it at all. Kind of odd, but oh well, moving on. Jill finds an underground lab where she finds out that Wesker is working for Umbrella Corporation, the company that created the T-virus, finding evidence that points to Umbrella wanting to wipe out STARS. After some exploration, Jill finds Chris in a cell, but she can't unlock it. Instead, she leaves him there and decides to come back for him later on. Jill finds an elevator that leads to a lab, and is followed by Barry. Jill and Barry then find Wesker in the lab.
Wesker!
Thank you, Barry.
Well, what do you know?
Oh, don't blame Barry for everything. I hear that his better half and 2 lovely daughters will be in danger if he doesn't do everything I tell him to.
Wesker, you're pathetic.
Well, you shouldn't worry too much, dear. You'll be free of all this anyway.
Why eliminate STARS?
Believe it or not, that's Umbrella's intention.
You're just a slave of Umbrella.
Smart girl. But I think you misunderstand me. The things you mentioned are nothing. I'll burn all of them along with this entire laboratory. Barry, go up on the ground and wait there.
Barry.
You gotta love Barry. He must really be afraid of Umbrella.
You and Umbrella took his family. You bastard. Oh!
Umbrella? Well, I used some carrots and sticks to cow him, but it had nothing to do with Umbrella. I just used Barry for my personal interests. Though both you and Barry seem to think I was following Umbrella's orders.
What? What are you planning?
I guess it's time for show and tell.
Wesker then reveals his secret project, the Tyrant, an incredibly powerful bioweapon that he lets out. Oh, great!
Damn it!
Jill and Barry together. In hell.
You want a piece of me?
What? Premature.
No, Barry! You viral cultured freak!
Jill then needs to fight the Tyrant alone.
Barry! Barry! You're okay.
Jill, sorry. That was careless of me. Wesker.
He's gone.
First, let's just get out of here.
Wesker disappeared and seemingly activated the self-destruct, forcing Jill, Barry, and now Chris to get out as quickly as possible. When near the roof, Brad, the helicopter pilot who abandoned Alpha Team in the forest, calls out on the radio that he is running out of fuel, and this is their last chance of escape. Upon reaching the roof, Jill finds a very conveniently placed signal for the helicopter. She sets it off and all is well until the Tyrant busts through the floor and sets up for one last fight. Jill fights it off, and Brad chucks down a rocket launcher, leading to the single most badass moment in the game. Leading to the single most badass moment in the game. And that is it. The story of Resident Evil summarized. It's a pretty good storyline, and I've left out a few details for the sake of time. Overall, the story is pretty dark. It throws our characters into the deep end, and as players, we really have to pick up the pieces. The bits of exposition found throughout the mansion also help to make the story feel more interconnected. You learn stories of characters that you never even see in the game, and I haven't really shown them off because I want them to still be a surprise when you play the game. The twist at the end, where Wesker reveals himself, probably isn't news to a lot of you, but let's try to imagine that we didn't see it coming. It's a pretty predictable twist, given that he acts so calmly to the situation and he is pretty much non-existent for the majority of the game. But Wesker as the villain was a very good choice, since even if you see it coming, it still feels like a stinging betrayal, and he's very menacing in his last scene. Wesker is a fairly one-note character, fulfilling the mad scientist role that the game seems to enforce. The tyrant being comparable to Frankenstein's monster, and Wesker essentially being Frankenstein, is a very cheesy reveal, but it works, allowing the story to have a good twist, regardless of how cheesy or predictable it is. Barry, as the sidekick of Jill's story, gives the narrative a sense of intrigue it just didn't have without him. The moments where he seemed a bit weird or out of character work to make the player feel like there is no one they can trust. The moment in the storyline where Jill has to choose the fate of Barry is the perfect example of this. After hours of wondering whose side he is on, the player has to choose his fate, with the positive outcome being that he survives. Obviously, that is the best one. Interestingly, if you decide to kill Barry, he is thrown off the platform by Lisa. Then a photo of his family slowly hits the floor, signifying how much of an asshole you are for simply not giving him his damn gun. Honestly, the storyline is more like set dressing for the game. It isn't really supposed to be this ultra-deep thriller that delves into bioterrorism. The game is full of wooden voice acting, silly scenarios, and ridiculous concepts that are hard to take seriously. Yet it is these lighter moments that contrast so heavily with the dark horror of the rest of the game. It provides the game with a rather unique tone that the series is familiar with at this point. The storyline is good for giving us a certain sense of intrigue, yet the plot itself is adequate. The game instead decides to devote a lot of its energy in different areas. Moving on to the gameplay section of this video. In this section, I will be explaining the different elements that make up the gameplay of Resident Evil Remake. Resident Evil Remake, like many other survival horror games, is fairly slow-paced, utilizing tank controls, which are essentially a form of movement that mimics a tank, surprisingly enough. You cannot make any immediate turns without having to stop and rotate the character. Tank controls are something that can be hard to get used to. At first, they feel unintuitive and stiff. You really have to focus on getting to grips with how your character moves, and for a lot of people that could seem annoying at first. But they do have a specific purpose. When you navigate the game, the camera will switch to different angles and shots, as I'm sure you have noticed. Tank controls mean that when you push forward, your character will move forward, regardless of the direction that the camera may be angled towards. Compare this to the alternative control set that lets you move the character dependent on the angle of the camera. Just as a quick little example, here I'm going to move down the hall. In tank controls, in order to do that, I have to turn my character left by using left on the D-pad or left on the control stick, and then I have to push forward. In the alternative control scheme, all I have to do is push down on the analog stick or the D-pad and the character will move in that direction. This is something that is very hard for me to explain, and it's probably something that you just have to try to see which kind of style you prefer. Personally, I don't think tank controls are the only movement style that can necessitate tension or horror. Yes, tank controls force you to play the game in a slightly different way, making you take things slowly and letting you soak in the tension. And you can learn to use tank controls to the efficiency of a more familiar movement system. It just takes a bit to get used to it. However, I don't think that tank controls are essential to creating a horror experience. This is something that the remaster of the remake understands, as you have the option to either pick the classic tank controls or a variation that plays more to how you would move in any other game. So, whereas tank controls are an interesting point of discussion, if you don't like them, then you don't have to use them. Combat in the game is fairly simple, with a lot of strategy that goes along with it. When you pull out your weapon, you can no longer move. You can rotate and aim up, down or stay neutral, but you cannot run. This turns combat into a flight or fight situation. Will you stand there and try to take down an enemy, or will you decide to run and try to evade it? Combat is a gamble in the game, as you never know how much ammo will be used to kill an enemy, as it's fairly variable. A handgun may take an enemy down in as many as 3 to 10 hits, whereas a shotgun may do it in 2 to 3 hits. There are certainly situations where combat is unavoidable, such as in boss fights, where your positioning, your weapon, and your awareness of the environment are all keys to succeeding. When outside of combat, the game is highly focused on exploration, searching throughout rooms to find items or the solution to puzzles. The general flow of the game is that you will start in an area and find a locked door to which there is a key. You then look for the key, unlock said door, and repeat the process. This sounds rather mundane, especially when written down, but in practice, the act of exploration is rewarding. Rewarding in the sense that you find more and more of the mansion's secrets. While the general framework of progression is gated by the usage of locked doors and keys, it is the items you find along the way and the exposition of former inhabitants that make the experience so rewarding. The combat is used more as an icebreaker to the progression, giving you obstacles that, in reality, do not pose any immediate threat. You have a handful of weapons to help you fight back against the enemies you'll encounter, starting with the handgun that you get at the start of the game. Not very powerful, but there is plenty of ammo for it all over the mansion. The handgun is a decent weapon that is used simply due to the fact that it has plenty of ammo. It's probably a better idea to use this gun rather than waste the ammo of another. The interesting thing about weapons in this game is that they are not just found in a room and that's it, end of story. They have either a puzzle or an interesting event coinciding with them. For instance, the shotgun is found in an unassuming room. It sits on a small rack that was being weighed down by the shotgun. This triggers a scene where the room you exit into has its ceiling coming down, prepared to crush you unless you can get out. As Chris, you have to find the broken shotgun and swap it out for the real one. As Jill, Barry comes to save you, within moments of Jill nearly being crushed.
Grab my hand!
Barry.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Really? Thanks.
The shotgun is a weapon that you can get quite early on, capable of ending most enemies in just a few shots. Next to the handgun, I'd say it has the second most plentiful supply of ammo. It's the gun you'll probably be taking with you to boss fights or busy corridors. The second variation is the assault shotgun, which boasts a much bigger clip, from 6 shots to 10 shots maximum. You get this by giving Richard the antidote to the snake venom. In this playthrough, that did not happen. The next weapon that comes to mind is the grenade launcher that Jill finds on the East Terrace, found near the corpse of Forrest, another member of Bravo team. Forrest actually does come back as a zombie and attacks Jill. The grenade launcher is capable of firing grenades, acid, and incendiary rounds. Acid rounds seem to deal a great amount of damage to hunters, an enemy that you meet in the last section of the mansion. Incendiary rounds are especially useful against the giant spiders, and are good against the regular zombies too. Surprisingly, there is quite a lot of ammo for the grenade launcher, and it is useful in various circumstances. The Magnum is the next notable weapon that you can obtain. The Magnum lies in the graveyard along the road to the residences. The grave itself is unlocked using 3 medallions that are obtained by using the Wind Crest. The Wind Crest is obtained through a small puzzle on the east side of the mansion, on the 2nd floor. This might sound like a lot of work, but trust me, it is 100% worth it, as it's a great gun to use on bosses and any enemy that's giving you trouble. I tended to save the ammo for the Magnum until the last hour or 2 of the game, just so I was prepared for any annoying enemies. The Magnum is a weapon that is very useful if you can restrain yourself from using it too much. The ammo for the gun isn't as plentiful as the pistol or shotgun. The flamethrower is exclusive to Chris, as he uses it to navigate various puzzles underneath the courtyard. Unfortunately, the flamethrower isn't used for very long, as it's needed to unlock a door to escape the underground. It is a vital weapon for the Black Tiger Spider boss fight, as it deals with the boss in a matter of seconds. Jill has the incendiary grenades as an alternative. The self-defense gun is found by a man hanging by the neck in the residences. It was used by the hanging man to shoot someone who was left in the nearby bathroom. The gun itself is extremely powerful, considering its size, but only has one shot, making the gun a valuable item for an enemy or boss that is giving you trouble. On my first playthrough, I scoffed at it, judging it by its size. Never judge it by its size. The last weapon in the game you receive is the rocket launcher, which is only used for one thing, and that one thing is pretty badass. And of course, the knife. We cannot forget about the knife. I'm aware that there are a ton of unlockable weapons in the game, but I'm not going to cover them in this video because, to be honest, this video is long enough and there are other videos out there that would probably explain them a lot better than I can. At this point, I think I'll touch on the gameplay differences between Chris and Jill. Chris has 6 inventory slots, whereas Jill has 8. This has a massive effect on gameplay as it forces the player to be more conservative as Chris. Chris has to be more tactful with his items, as realistically, he can't carry more than one weapon plus its ammo if he is to engage with collecting herbs and puzzle items. This doesn't make the game more difficult, it just makes it slightly more annoying to have to visit a save room every 5 minutes. Jill's strengths lie in her exploration, not combat. In combat, she has less health than Chris and isn't able to use weapons to the same effectiveness. That is where they try to make Chris balanced. He is able to take more punishment, but finds it harder to explore as efficiently. Is that worth it considering all the disadvantages? I'll leave that up to you. Moving on to defense items, with the first being the dagger. Defense items are used to interrupt an attempted grab by an enemy, often not killing them, but definitely allowing you to either run away or reposition yourself for another attack. The dagger is the first defense item found by both characters and simply stabs the enemy, allowing you to break free without having to take any damage. Chris's second defense item is a flash grenade. If he is grabbed by a regular zombie, he shoves it in its mouth and a few moments later, the head of the zombie explodes. Great for dealing with crimson heads that have surprised you. If an enemy has grabbed you but Chris can't put it in its mouth, he will throw it to the ground next to them, damaging any enemy caught in the blast radius. Jill's second defense item is a stun gun. It stuns the enemy for a longer period than the dagger would, and that's pretty much it. The stun gun doesn't really have as much potential utility as the grenades in Chris's arsenal, but they're still useful. We mentioned save rooms earlier on in the video. Save rooms are designated rooms throughout the game which allow you to save and deposit or withdraw items from your storage box. Noted by the familiar melody that is an iconic element of the series. Save rooms are renowned for their peaceful atmosphere, a juxtaposition from the horror of the rest of the game. They act as temporary safe havens that allow you to recoup. The main function for save rooms, as you might have guessed, is for saving. There are typewriters throughout the game, which allow you to save your progress, provided that you have an ink ribbon in your inventory. Ink ribbons are finite, so you cannot save your game very frequently. This increases the tension of the game tenfold, making you panic about when the right time to save is. I think save rooms are a fascinating tool in the game to keep the horror fresh. The contrast of the safe haven to the zombie-infested hallways is very effective in making the player range in emotion, from relieved to anxious. Of course, there is a certain amount of fear attributed to having to redo progress from a save that you made a long time ago, which can be annoying, but the saving system maintains tension. Ink ribbons as a concept are fascinating, due to their consumable nature. It is rare to find a game with a saving system that relies on consumable items. Silent Hill, a game similar in design, utilized save points, similar to typewriters but with an infinite use. Dead Space, another horror title, also had designated save points that allowed infinite saving. So, Resident Evil is the odd one out. We've discussed that the ink ribbons add a large amount of tension to the game, and perhaps they add a bit of comfort. Having a large number of ink ribbons allows you to have many potential saves, versus a low amount of ribbons that provide a fewer number of saves. Obvious stuff. The ribbons themselves are a great way of communicating tension to the player through a gameplay mechanic. Not even the simple act of saving is something you can rely on. Instead, saving the game is a gamble and a potential mistake. We've talked about the story and the gameplay, but not the most important element, the horror. Now, what we find scary will differ on an individual basis. For instance, Silent Hill 2 scares the crap out of me, and I swear I will do one of these videos for that game at some point. But Resident Evil didn't really scare me all that much. Does that mean the horror in this game is ineffective or lackluster? Absolutely not. Horror isn't necessarily measured by how you personally are affected by it, due to its subjective effect on people. Therefore, I measure horror on the atmosphere that is created, and the way that atmosphere is disrupted. Resident Evil is a fantastic horror game. The atmosphere can be summed up as oppressive, tense, and unnerving. The main component behind the game's horror is the idea of suspense and relief, a famous film technique pioneered by Alfred Hitchcock, that can be applied to this very game. There are moments in the game that are interrupted by a sound effect that occurs out of sight for the player. For a few moments, this results in confusion and suspense. The player has no real idea what is waiting for them just out of view. I argue that every moment spent outside of a save room is suspenseful. Every moment spent exploring, fighting, reading, and simply walking is suspenseful. That is because the game never wants you to be comfortable. It never wants you to feel safe, except for the save rooms, which are always safe havens, thereby giving relief to the player, relief that is then taken away as soon as they step out of that door. There are also various moments in the game where the perspective shifts away from the regular gameplay and quickly switches to a cutscene. Specifically, the point of view shots of a zombie walking towards the room you are in, and a hunter busting through all of the doors to get to you. These moments are designed to shock you and make you panic. It is the combination of the suspense that we just discussed, mixed with the quick thinking that the player must perform. The sound design in this game is also very important. The echo of footsteps as you walk around the main hall, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the dining room, and the scurried footsteps of a Crimson Head running after you in the hallways. The sound is designed to be distinct enough so that you can distinguish every sound from each other. The sound is also key to combat. When you shoot at an enemy that is off screen, you need to know if you are actually hitting them. Enemies will also react in different ways if they're about to perform different attacks. Sound is key in this game to not only establish horror, but to assist in the immersion of the overall game. I know that I said this game wasn't really scary to me, but damn, do I respect this game's atmosphere, attention to detail, and overall eeriness that oozes out of every moment in this game. To conclude, we've talked about the Resident Evil Remake quite a bit now. To finish off, I want to summarize my thoughts on the game. The Resident Evil Remake is a game that stands the test of time. At the time of this recording, I've only beaten 3 Resident Evil games. This is the game that stood out to me the most. Its gameplay is still very satisfying, and the gameplay loop of exploration and puzzling is fantastic. The horror atmosphere is potent and is dripping with B-movie cheese. It isn't my favourite game in the series so far. That award goes to the Resident Evil 2 remake. But this game is the one that impresses me the most for how timeless it truly is. This video was done unintentionally around the 17th anniversary of the game, and I really wanted to celebrate it with a massive video. Obviously the first on my channel. I intend to give other games this sort of treatment, not just Resident Evil games, but any game that I find interesting enough, and I do hope that you stick around for the ride.